We're back with our college football sprint with Zach Smith. Zach, did you have a good Thanksgiving weekend?
Yeah, man, it was great. Just hung out with the fam, ate good food. Can't complain.
It's so weird not having a Michigan game to watch.
So weird.
Not having any game to watch.
Yeah, not any game worth watching to watch.
Right.
Really.
It was just an awful weekend of college football, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just bad. It was bad. I mean, the North Carolina game was all right, and the Texas-Iowa State game was competitive, but I don't think outside of that it was just terrible football to watch.
No doubt.
So let's actually talk about the reason why there wasn't a game on Saturday, which, it's anytime controversy happens around anything related to Ohio State football, you get a lot of voices, a lot of opinions, a lot of unnecessary voices, and a lot of unnecessary opinions as well. So there's a lot to filter through. But essentially what happened here was there was an outbreak within the team. Multiple players got it. Support staff, including Coach Ryan Day, had contracted COVID. And so in an abundance of caution, what I'm understanding from what I'm seeing is that they reached the threshold by which was like the 5% or 7% of the team and staff where they could cancel the game, but they didn't necessarily have to. But I think, Gene Smith and Ryan Day and everybody else, Dr. Borchers, made the decision that in an abundance of caution, the best thing to do was to walk away from this game and try to make sure that we were able to play the final 2 games of the season. With that said, there's a lot of people who think that Ohio State should have played this game. And then there's also controversy around kind of how many days someone who gets COVID has to sit out, with the Big Ten kind of having a 21-day period, which is probably the biggest point of contention that I think is valid in this whole thing, is the 21-day period. But, let's just get into and talk about this from a 360 perspective, guys.
Well, here's my biggest thing. First of all, Ohio State made a smart decision if they could control everything, right? If they could control everything, pause this so that they can still play 6 games, still make the Big Ten championship. That was their goal. Here's the problem. They don't control everything. We saw it with Maryland before, and Michigan's already trying to duck the smoke that Ohio State has coming their way, announcing COVID right now. So what happens is Ohio State, in my opinion, made a grave mistake in canceling this game. You saw Minnesota go play Purdue with 20 people out. I mean, it's possible. And what I don't get is, and it'll be good conversation, is how is it any more likely to spread the virus if you travel to Illinois? I can't fathom it. Like, these kids, instead of going to Illinois, they got sent back to their apartments and dorms. And, they went to Chipotle to pick up to-go food. They went to McDonald's to go to the drive-thru. Why is it more likely to get COVID if you travel on a plane with only the people that you've been with all the time and go to a hotel, eat meals, and play a game? Like, what's the difference? Just more people, I guess, you come in contact with? The virus can live on this table, on V's hat, on Partha's headphones. Like, it can live anywhere. I don't understand why playing that game would have caused more outbreak. I can't understand it.
I think the only counter to that would be if they knew that there was a pretty big exposure here, and that there were going to potentially be more positive tests that came through down the line, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, leading into the game, because they didn't know just what the level of exposure was. That's the only counter that I would give to that. And I do think the logic, like you said, of, okay, if this thing is spreading and we have a potential outbreak, if we're confident that we can contain it by separating everyone now and contain it at this 5% level, we're in a better position than if we go and play Illinois and we come back after the Illinois game and we have 20 new positive tests. I guess that's the only thing, because I agree with you that this is a very challenging decision, but kind of what I have an issue with is like the level of outrage here, because look, Ohio State University wants to play Ohio State to go to the Big Ten championship because it makes them money. Ryan Day and the players want to play. So once this decision was made, and it was made amongst all of the different vested interest, I do think it's the responsibility, just like I don't even like to compare this to a time of war, but if you are a member of the Ohio State community, to kind of support the decision as much as you can. Now we can debate the Big Ten rules and how that all works. But the fact that this was a cohesive decision made between the medical people, the administrative staff, and the coaching staff, I do think it is our responsibility to support it. I don't know if you guys disagree with that.
I'll say to Zach's point, if you were going to just isolate the people who had tested positive, right?
Yeah.
Then why would all of the rest of the players and coaching staff not be able to do what they were already planning to do? Because to Zach's point, if we're planning on the theory that, playing college football doesn't cause COVID, but exposure outside of that does, then playing Illinois shouldn't actually make anyone on the team more likely to catch it. And so if you just isolated the people who are sick, you should still be able to go and get that win. That's not going to be a hard win for the team to get, even without Ryan Day, right? So I think there's inconsistency in terms of enforcing a rule that affects a whole bunch of people that really, if you exclude the population that's sick, these people would have already done exactly, what the plan was in the case that those people had tested healthy, right? The only question, to your point, V, is there a much broader thing across the team that a whole bunch of other people are sick and they just don't want to test all of them because they don't want to, lose the next game as well.
And also the 21-day period, right? Like
right.
if a whole bunch of other guys like that aren't testing positive now come up positive and they have to disclose that. What if Justin Fields is sick? What if significant players test positive? Now they're not able to play in the next 2 games. So that's another thing that I think probably was considered in their thinking. I don't know. And I also don't think we fully understand how the incubation period of this thing works, from exposure to someone that's sick to when you actually test positive.
This whole situation has shown the inconsistencies we see across how we even think about or enforce rules, right? Like this decision to all of our points is clearly a strategic one based on how the rest of the season looks and trying to be conservative early and not let anyone else get sick. But it's weird because the premise of going back to playing sports is that we should be able to play the sports and keep the players safe, right? So when the disease itself and the protocols around it become a point of strategy for teams that try and edge out on top, it gets to be kind of a weird situation.
Yeah. And that was the danger. And Zach, you called this out. We talked about this at the beginning of just how much strategy is involved and how much people are willing to risk to get a win or not take a loss, because every loss matters in college football and every win matters. So the issue really at large here is that I don't think that Ohio State or any school in the Big Ten should pay a price for being safe, right? And they should be able to, it should be a fluid situation. Like this 21-day period should be revisited, because that's not the NFL. No other organization has that stringent of a guideline where you have to sit. But then the counter to that is, if you're Wisconsin and you had to already do that and miss 3 games, now that it's Ohio State, why would you not cry foul if they change the rule for Ohio State?
Well, that's the reality of the issue, right? This just comes down to egos and people that just don't want to admit they were wrong about anything. I mean, 21 days is the most outrageous thing. You couldn't find a medical professional in the world that would mandate 21 days except for Dr. Borchers. It's amazing. Like this guy's like the most paranoid, safe doctor that ever lived. 21, like the CDC now says 10 days, not even 14 anymore. And this guy's like, nope, we're going 3 months. Sorry. Like it's just bizarre. But to your point, I think to the strategy of it, you look at, all right, Ohio State doesn't control their own destiny, right? The Big Ten presidents and commissioner put everyone in a bad spot. The way they handled the launch of the season and then the no launch, canceled launch. It was a train wreck. And the College Football Playoff Committee already has made it clear. They put Clemson over Ohio State. They've made it clear. If you don't play enough games, you're out. I don't care if you win them all. Yeah. And that was created by the Big Ten presidents, Dr. Borchers and Kevin Warren. It just was. And you look at a program like Michigan now, they control Ohio State's destiny.
Yeah.
Like Jim Harbaugh just lost to 0-5 Penn State. He is a complete train wreck. If he doesn't get fired at Michigan, he might be trying to salvage something to get the Lions job. The last thing in the world he wants to do is get 50 hung up on him by Ohio State. And no reason not to cancel. I mean, they already said, oh, we got one case. We're nervous. Sorry, no game. And then they ruin Ohio State's championship hopes. They ruin everything. And Jim Harbaugh gets to ride off into sunset and go coach the Detroit Tigers or Lions or whatever they are.
Yeah. And I'm in complete agreement that we need to hold the people that need to be held accountable.
Right.
And one of the larger issues that I have, and this is exposing the farce that is college athletics fully, right? Because it's like, okay, you guys are all paid very large salaries, and a lot of money is fed into these organizations to do what? To be run well.
Absolutely.
And what this is exposing is that they aren't run well, and they only care. The only thing all they are is a middleman for the money, because there should be better protocols in place. There should be better governance in place. There should be more proactive management and contingencies in place. But what this thing is showing is just how grossly mismanaged and terrible the organization structure of the NCAA and amateur athletics is.
Yeah. And NCAA, I mean, they've had that reputation for a while too. So this isn't really a huge surprise, but it's just another in the string of disappointments of college sports.
Yeah. There's no doubt. And this is a topic that might be too deep for my listeners, but your listeners would be really into it. But it just blows my mind, the industry of second or continued education, colleges, universities, how it's one of the few professions where you get tenured and these presidents, like, they do things with no repercussion. It's like, oh, you're a shitty professor. No, I have shitty students. It's like, oh, okay, well, that works. Keep making your money. Keep it moving. It's amazing because these university presidents are skating scot-free after one of the biggest mishaps in the history of the conference, probably the most colossal mishap of the conference. And then Kevin Warren is taking a lot of blame, rightfully so, but he's also taking a lot of blame for a bunch of academic people that no one really cares if they do a good job or not.
Yeah. And that's the point that I wanted to underline. It's very convenient to point out. And I think it's understandable. That's how people are going to react. It's all Kevin Warren's fault. But Kevin Warren is doing the job. He's kind of he is the scapegoat, essentially, for a lot of things that were set in place before he even became president. And everyone's kind of, the mismanagement by the Big Ten is just it's mind-boggling that we're at this level. And it will be truly unfortunate if it does cost the conference, what they care about most, which is they lose a lot of money if Ohio State doesn't make it to the Big Ten championship. They lose a lot of money if the Ohio State doesn't go to the college football playoff. And the reason they reactivated the season, they're going to act like it was because they wanted to give the kids a chance, but no, they wanted that money, and now that money's at risk. And
they saw an opportunity with the antigen test or whatever coming out, and they were like, "Oh, quick, use that. Pretend that's why."
Yep. And the reason they canceled, they didn't want the liability. So, I mean, sometimes things need to fail this miserably for us to actually change them. So I hope, hopefully things do get better out of the flames and the phoenix rises out of the ashes of 2020. But, I think we've hit this topic. Is there anything else on it that you guys wanted to talk about?
No, man, no. I'm ready to move this thing forward. Talk about Oregon and Oregon State here. That was a surprise.
Shocking.
Yeah.
It's just the state of the West Coast is really what it is. I mean, you could say the Pac-12, but it's everyone out there. Like, you go that far west, and it's like that's the brand of football. It's the worst Power 5 conference. The Big 12, you could have an argument, but I think Oklahoma, Texas, Iowa State would mop the floor with pretty much everyone in the Pac-12 except for maybe Oregon. But yeah, that was shocking. And Oregon State has done a decent job in recruiting and landed a couple transfers. One kid that I recruited so I was shocked. I mean, I thought Oregon had a chance to be kind of one of those teams that people talked about, that maybe the postponement of the season is why they didn't make it. But I thought they had a shot, and clearly not.
Yeah, I want to dig deeper there. in terms of the Pac-12. Partha, you live out on the West Coast in California. You know how much talent
Well,
is out there.
I'll say football's not the culture here. Basketball's more the culture.
Yeah, it
But
is.
my thought was always with Oregon, with their proximity to Nike, I always thought that they would get, more of the talent than most. But it seems like, and Zach, you'll probably have to fill in some color here. I always thought the Ohio State connection to Nike, since LeBron really, really grew to prominence, was the strongest relationship in college sports to that brand. And the benefit they, from what I see in the sports side of things, like sports performance, I would wager that a lot of the better resources end up in Ohio State's corner from, companies that really are pushing to see what athletes can do. Can you attest to that? Is that kind of what happens?
Yeah, it was probably, I want to say it was 4 years ago when Ohio State renegotiated their, it's like anything else. It's like athletes.
Right. Yeah.
Like 4 years ago, Ohio State renegotiated their commitment with or partnership with Nike and became the number one Nike school in the world. Right. And then I'm sure since then, some new school had to renegotiate and superseded Ohio State's contract. But I mean, it's carte blanche. I mean, whatever you need, whatever you want, the latest technologies, the latest shoes, the latest everything before they're out in stores, Ohio State has them, but so does Oregon. I think just the budget and amount that they're allowed is a little bit higher, but what are we talking about? So a walk-on gets 4 pairs of gloves instead of 2. You know what I mean? It's not that big of a deal.
Does that affect recruiting?
It can. I mean, it's like icing on the cake at dessert, right? It certainly doesn't hurt your meal, but it might help it a little, but you're not getting somebody to say that was the best meal of my life just because the icing was good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I don't understand and is this: there's so much talent out there. We know this. You recruit out there, and schools from all over the country pull talent from California and that region generally. There's so much talent, and there's some really good coaches in the Pac-12 too. Like you've got Herm Edwards with NFL experience, David Shaw at Stanford. Oregon has a decent coach, and USC. You have blue blood programs. What exactly caused this level of a fall in such a talent-rich region?
I think it's the premier programs, right? And who is a premier program? Only really USC. Who else has won a national championship out there in the last 30 years, right? Yeah. So you would say Utah is exceeding expectations year in, year out, right?
Yeah.
To recruit to that recruiting base is just unbelievable what Kyle Whittingham's doing there. Yeah. Oregon has been kind of what you'd expect. I mean, it's a hard place to recruit to get to anything. They just had this ridiculous Nike connection and jersey combinations, and it was really in vogue with Chip Kelly, and it's kind of faded since then.
Yeah.
And then, so really you're talking USC. That's what you're talking about. What happened to USC? And it's Pete Carroll left, a bunch of shady shit went on the red carpets and with Reggie Bush, and they just have never bounced back from that. And I think they're one superstar coach away from making the West Coast relevant again, right? Yeah. You're seeing kids leave California and Arizona left and right, going all over the place. And it's just, they just need the patriarch. They need USC back, right?
Yeah, and there have been a lot of rumblings. Speaking about that, there's every year when this comes around, there are always rumblings about Urban potentially going to USC, which is probably one of the safest jobs after Ohio State he could take, right? Do you think that that's even something he would consider?
I don't think it's even on the table. One, I don't think he's going to coach in the next 5 years. After that, who knows? He may have the itch, but he's also getting older. But I don't think it would be USC, although I will say he's an idiot, because if he took his name and everything about him to LA, his brand and his platform would, multiply times a billion. Yeah. It'd be like LeBron and him in LA. Yeah. It would be unbelievable, but he won't do it. But we can hope, right? That would be the best thing to happen to college football in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
It would be really fun.
Yeah.
Really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that would clean up some of the stuff we're talking about with the NCAA, getting a little bit more light.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, moving on to a topic I know you hate wanting to talk about, Zach. What happened to Texas this weekend against Iowa State? Obviously, it was a competitive game. Obviously,
this was a fun game to watch.
It was a really good competitive game. But at the end of the day, Iowa State has no business beating Texas in the Big 12. It happened. And afterwards, one of the more kind of comments that got a lot of traction was what Iowa State's running back said, which was they have 5-star players, we have 5-star culture, which I thought really hits home the point of a lot of things we've been talking about, how it's not just the talent, it's the development of the talent and the culture you bring in there. Zach, I'm going to give this stage to you. What's wrong with the culture at Texas where they're able to get the talent, but they're not able to develop them and get the most out of them?
I mean, I think, and everyone knows my opinion on him. He was a really good football coach, but not a great head coach. It starts with the head coach, and when your head coach is a smoke and mirrors coach, I mean, everything he does is a charade. Going back to when he would try to fight Mike Vrabel at a mat drill, it was like everyone saw through it. It was all phony. Like everything he does is very intelligent. He can speak well. He can try to sell it, but ultimately, it's a glass house. And when one stone comes across the bow, that bitch is shattering. And it's just what it is. And then you see it in his own program. Not only did Breece Hall call it out, but then Sam Ehlinger. And you think about a relationship between a head coach and a franchise quarterback. There's nobody that has the head coach's back more than the 3-year starting quarterback, right? They asked him, is Tom Herman getting the most out of his players or is coaching the issue? And the kid said, that's the $1 million question that everyone doesn't know.
Crazy that
and you're like, what?
Yeah,
You're not even going to back up your guy? Yeah. And then they have a team captain, 34-game starter in Samuel Cosme, their tackle, just opted out on Sunday. Like the evidence of cultural like implosion is, I mean, you'd have to be an absolute idiot not to see it, but it is what it is. I think that is the issue, right? That's why they're even on an even playing field with Iowa State. My issue goes even deeper than that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, they're on a level playing field with Iowa State, which is criminal, and he should be fired for that. But then his coaching decisions in the game that cost them the game, faking a punt on 4th and 8, and they end up 3 yards short. 4th and 2, he plows his quarterback forward like he has for 10 years and gets stuffed instead of kicking a field goal. Like goes 3 and out when he has a chance to grind out the clock. Like so many coaching decisions cost them that game that it's like that's 2 for 2, man. You got to go.
Yeah, and that's after a performance like that with coaching mistakes, right? You know, I thought that he might get fired after the game. You know,
I think the reality is this. I talked to a former All-American at Texas that was a football coach forever, and we talked about this job just yesterday. And the issue that Texas has is one, it's a massive buyout. No problem, they got plenty of money, but do they want to spend it to fire Tom Herman, and who are they getting to replace him? Like a lot of times ADs lose sight of it, and obviously Texas hasn't, that, okay, we could fire this guy that's obviously not working out, but will we get someone that can come in and do better? Because I really classify this implosion that Texas has had with Charlie Strong and now Tom Herman, and I kind of equate it to when Phil Fulmer got fired at Tennessee. It was like, the pastures sure look greener on the other side. You get rid of this guy who's been really successful. You make 3 bad hires, and look at Tennessee. I mean, they're like fighting with Vanderbilt. That could be Texas in a minute if they don't make the right hires. You know what I mean?
Yep, and you're looking at what Mac Brown's doing in North Carolina.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I will say the kicker at the end, I am really impressed by the distance he got on that kick. I was really rooting for that to go in.
Hey, I think we can move on. Do you have any thoughts on who might be a good fit for that job?
So I think I put it out on my show, and I think there's 3 different lists, right? One is the who they won't get, but people will talk about, right? Urban Meyer, number 1. Not going to happen. People will talk about it. Sounds good. It's cute. The other guy's Eric Bieniemy, right? The hottest name in coaching. He's going to be an NFL head coach. There's not a chance in hell he's going to jump to college to clean up that dumpster fire. No way. Then there's the who they should get but won't get, right? The first is Joe Brady, the coordinator at the Panthers that was the coordinator with Joe Burrow, won a national title, would be an insanely great hire.
Great hire.
And then the other 2 that they should get but won't have questionable character pasts. And I think they would hire them if they weren't following, or if they weren't going to follow a degenerate like Tom Herman. And that's Steve Sarkisian, who had the alcohol issues, trying to sleep with reporters at USC deal. And then Hugh Freeze, who had God knows everything, like prostitution rings. But they're actually killing it in coaching, right? They should be on the radar for Texas, right? But that won't happen. So I think the only guy is Matt Campbell at Iowa State, who just beat him. And they have to make a decision. Would firing Tom Herman and paying him millions result in Matt Campbell coming in and being a better coach? Will it bring the program back? If the answer is no, they got to keep Tom for another year.
Yep. That makes sense.
Wow.
Makes sense.
So moving back into the Big Ten here, Michigan State beat Northwestern, and my greatest joy this weekend came from our prediction last week coming true, which was Michigan losing to Penn State. That was fun, man.
It was beautiful. It just speaks to what's going on in Michigan. I mean, it's an absolute train wreck, similar to Texas. I mean, just the some of the things you look at when you look at Jim Harbaugh's tenure, and it's like, how is this guy still have a job, but they're really floating around the idea that he might leave Michigan and take an NFL job. And it just blows me away. Like, in what world could you make that jump with the production he's had at the college level? It's bizarre, but
it goes back to that nepotism and fraternal, like he's
that's what it is. That's what it is. The NFL, they just recycle coaches. I mean, once you're in. You'll get fired somewhere because your position group sucks. Immediately, someone else hires you because you're the best thing ever. It's like it's a hard industry to crack into because nobody gets fired for good.
Yeah. The tough thing about watching both of these teams is, given the past years of them both being a lot better than they have been this year, the athletes on the field were incredible. And the brand of football being played was not even close to the caliber of the players.
Yeah.
Well, I think we need to come to the realization right now, and as painful and as disgusting as it is to say it, the Big Ten is the new ACC.
Yeah.
I mean, the ACC is a stronger conference than the Big Ten today.
Yeah.
It just is. And you hate to see it. You hate to say it. But the ACC made a categorically brilliant move in bringing Notre Dame in for at least for a year. And that might turn into a long-term deal, and stole away the only other blue blood that is worth a shit in the Midwest. And the Big Ten is another failure. Like, we're adding all these teams like Maryland and Rutgers and Nebraska. And it's like Notre Dame, we had a perfect opportunity to try to grab them, even if for a year. And we canceled the season and said, nah, go ahead, go somewhere else. And now we're the third best conference in the country.
Yeah. It's looking like there's a lot of work that needs to be done, because we knew Northwestern was playing above their level of talent.
For sure.
If you can't produce points, you can only win so long, in modern football. But at least we have Indiana on the rise,
that's for sure. That's for sure. It's just a matter of, we're talking the national landscape. Like, in my opinion, for Ohio State to make an Alabama run, they need to play some really good competition during the year to do it. And the Big Ten is not holding up their end of the bargain. They're not recruiting like the SEC. They're not coaching like the SEC. Their scheme, everything they're doing, their player development outside of Ohio State, no one is even close to that level. And it's just, it's depressing. Like, there's no reason why they can't be. They have money, right? That's all it takes. Hire the right guys, spend the money, and you got it.
Could Ohio State potentially leave the Big Ten?
No,
and could
never.
that be a strategic move? No.
I mean, if there was a time to do it, it was when they canceled the season. Ohio State could have just pulled the plug and said, this is ridiculous. Like, we'll talk later. Kind of one of those deals. Like, you get in a big fight with your girlfriend and you're like, all right, we'll just talk later. All right. I'm going to take a little time, but they're never going to. I mean, that's just, you talk about history, and I mean, they're a founding member. It's just not going to happen.
It's not just history, but it's also the power that they carry in this conference. It's hard to leave that behind. But let's move on from all this depressing stuff and to one of the more positive and uplifting stories of the weekend, which was Sarah Fuller becoming the first female in a Power 5 conference to play in a game as a kicker. I mean, obviously she placed that kick perfectly. We've seen over time just how competitive female soccer is and how good of a brand that is. Mia Hamm could kick a 50-yard field goal, no problem. Now, in that specific position, punter or kicker or place kicker, do you guys think that a female could ever make it into not just a Power 5, but potentially make it to the next level where they at least just handle the kicking duties?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a tough thing to answer. I mean, I think the biggest problem with kickers is their mental makeup. And so, sure, if there's a female out there with the mental fortitude, because to be honest, the male kickers are absolute head cases. So what if a female is too? What's the difference, right? As far as physiologically, I don't know if they have the leg for the NFL, but they could do it in college. I think it's possible. You've seen it at some smaller scale, and I think this was unfortunate. I mean, it's cool. It was cool that it happened. It was cool that history was made, but it also was kind of a random ploy to change the game by a lame duck head coach that was getting fired. It's like, okay, so now you're going to use this girl to kick a squib kick and try to like leave your mark on college football. Come on, bro. Like that's ridiculous.
That's a really good point. I think in general, this conversation comes up a lot about, different genders playing different sports. It goes outside of football, and it's an interesting thing because I think as a fan, it's like, well, if you're good enough to make the game better, then I would love to see you play regardless of your gender or your makeup, right?
Yeah. I think just physiologically, right? Females are not as strong and powerful and as explosive as men. Just, I think that's biology, but I'm sure someone will take offense to that somewhere in the world. So I think it's a men's sport is fair game. Like you said, like if a woman can come in and perform at a high level and enhance the sport, have at it. Now, for the other way around, I think it's the most criminal thing in the world to let a boy who like identifies as a girl go win 12 state championships. Is like, come on, man, that ain't fair. Like he was born stronger. What is that?
Did you see that? There's like this power lifter who broke all of the women's lifting records by identifying as a girl for 12 seconds while he did a deadlift. And went crazy viral, drew a ton of hate. But I mean, case in point, that's the downside of this kind of gender fluidity situation in today's society, right? Which, nothing against that, but if you're looking at athletic performance, you should be comparing apples to apples.
Yeah, that's a fair way to look at it. And moving on to one more positive thing, and Zach, I know I love talking about this subject with you specifically because I know you were probably the first person to identify how special this kid was. Terry McLaurin made a play in that Thanksgiving game. If you watched it, it was a 7-point game at that point.
Huge.
And they threw an interception. Jalen Smith, who's a very fast linebacker, caught the ball and seemed like he was going to dance his way into the end zone. You see Scary Terry get up, chase him down, and make a tackle around the 4-yard line. They hold him to a field goal. And from that point on, the game, obviously Mike McCarthy has no business as an NFL coach, it seems like, with the decisions he's making. But the game from there goes from a close game, that one play change, it ends up 41-16. Talk to us again about how special this kid is and how it makes you feel to see him go from that kid that Urban didn't even want to, at that point, he was leading the NFL in receiving after that game.
Well, it's awesome. I mean, it's just like anything else. Like you see a kid make a play like that, and when that's how he lives, that's how he lives his life, that's how he practices, that's how he runs go routes, that's how he blocks. Like that wasn't just a great effort play. Like that was his makeup and character as a human. You know what I mean? Yeah. That just to bounce up and as hard as he could possibly go to try to catch him and make a tackle. Like, and if the best part is, even if he couldn't, you would have seen the same effort. Like, even if it was so out of reach, you would have seen the same effort to try to get there. And that's what makes him different. Like, that's what makes it so cool is that was not just because he could make the tackle. That's just how he does everything.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
It's cool to see these young receivers like him, DK, just crushing it in the NFL right now. It's anytime a new generation really steps up and leaves their mark on the game is an exciting thing to witness.
Yeah, especially their maturity, right? Like to have that type of headspace, to be in the headspace that they're in at that young of an age is what we want to see from athletes, and specifically from the wide receiver position. You coach these guys. There's something wrong with a lot of them.
Most of them. What do you mean? Almost every one of them. But yeah, it's cool to see how he's impacting his team, and it's crazy to think about what he would be doing right now if he had a halfway decent quarterback. I mean, they benched Haskins for God knows what reason, and now he's playing with me and Partha, and it's like this kid's almost leading the NFL with like a duck throwing him a ball. Like it's just, Can you imagine with a good O-line and a good quarterback?
Yeah. I do want to also touch on, because there's a college connection, the Broncos. With Jordan Fuller, is it Jordan Fuller? Did I get the name right?
The Rams with Jordan Fuller?
The Broncos played a quarterback who was the quarterback at...
I think his name's like Hinton or something.
Kendall Hinton, there it is.
Yeah,
Kendall Hinton. Played quarterback this weekend for the Broncos. He was the quarterback at UCF. now a receiver in the league. You know, it wasn't pretty, but shout out to him. He said it was 24 hours before the game that he was called. He wasn't on a roster. Got told he's playing Sunday. Get over to Denver, you know. But pretty awesome just to see. I think for the general fan, it provides context as to the skill level in the NFL, because this is a guy who was a quarterback at a D1 school and was good enough to even be considered right to play in the NFL. And
Right.
I mean, it was rough watching the game, you know.
But
So
you knew it was going to be rough when the
Yeah.
Broncos petitioned the NFL and asked if their assistant coach could play quarterback
Yeah.
for one game. You're like, holy shit, are your quarterback that kid's that bad? Like,
yeah,
Yeah, it's crazy.
but yeah, it's a different level, especially that position. Just everything that goes on, the schemes, the way things happen, how fast they happen, and how well you need to know what you're doing. And that poor kid didn't stand a chance. I mean, that's why they tried to have the coach play, because the coach at least knows everything.
Yeah,
Like he studies film, he knows the offense in and out, and it was like, shit, even if he can't throw, he'll get us in the right protection or get us in the right run play.
yeah.
I mean, that kid had no chance.
So here's my question to you, Zach. If they asked you at Ohio State to come in and play because all the quarterbacks were sick or something against Michigan, right? What do you think the final score of the game would be with you as quarterback for
Oh my.
our Ohio State team
This year?
this year?
Oh, it
In
would
2
be bad.
weeks.
We don't have a run game. Who am I going to hand it to? I ain't throwing it to anybody. I mean, I tore my rotator cuff. I can't throw anymore, really. So the run game's just average. We're getting smoked. Smoked. You
I
put me
think
a
the
tight
Q-
end or something, I'll cut a guy.
I think the QB draw would get us about 6 inches every play.
Yeah, 6 inches from where I catch the snap.
Oh man, that's a great way to end the segment. I think a lot of our audience is contemplating seeing Zach in a uniform behind center right now. But
Yeah, if you want to see that, let's tweet at Ohio State at Coach Zach Smith. Let's get him in for QB.
We might need to find an adult men's league tackle football.
oh man, well that's all we have for today's show. Thanks again, Zach. These next few weeks are going to be crazy, so definitely stay tuned to our college football segment, and looking forward to this weekend. Hopefully, we
Yeah,
have
thanks for having me, guys.
a game.